There's a moment when you wake up and you don't recognize the person looking back at you in the mirror. Not physically, but something deeper. Something in the eyes. Something in the way you hold yourself, and you realize with a quiet terror that the person you were yesterday, the person who made promises, who felt certain emotions, who loved certain people, is gone. Not dead, just replaced. And tomorrow, you'll be someone else entirely. This isn't a story about fantasy. This is about something quieter, something most people don't want to admit. What if the stability you cling to, the identity you've built, the relationships you've invested in, what if all of it was built on the assumption that you would remain you? And what if that assumption was suddenly permanently broken? What if every 24 hours your personality reset? Your memories would stay. Your knowledge would remain. But the person experiencing those memories would be different. The way you feel about your partner, the passion you have for your work, the fears that kept you up at night, the dreams that gave you purpose, all of it would shift, not gradually, suddenly, completely, every single day. Think about what that would mean. Think about how much of your life is built on continuity, on the belief that the you who goes to sleep will be the same you who wakes up, that the promises you make today will still matter to you tomorrow, that the love you feel will still be there when the sun rises, that the person you're becoming is someone you'll recognize when you arrive. But what if you couldn't trust that anymore? What if you woke up tomorrow and the career you've dedicated years to suddenly felt meaningless? Not because circumstances changed, not because you failed, but because the person you became overnight simply doesn't care about the things you used to care about. The passion that drove you for years is gone, replaced by something else, something that makes yesterday's goals feel like someone else's dream. And maybe you'd try to continue anyway. Maybe you'd force yourself to go through the motions, to maintain the projects, to finish what you started. But how long could you sustain something that a different version of you commits to every single day? How do you build anything when the foundation of who you are shifts beneath you every 24 hours? Think about relationships. Think about love. Love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice. A commitment, a series of moments where you decide again and again that this person matters, that this connection is worth protecting. But what happens when the person making that choice is different every day? You might wake up tomorrow deeply in love, feeling connected, feeling grateful for your partner, and then the next day, you wake up and that feeling is gone. Not because they did something wrong, not because the relationship changed, but because you changed. The version of you that exists today simply doesn't feel what yesterday's version felt, and tomorrow's version might feel something entirely different. Your partner would still be the same person. They would still remember yesterday's conversation, yesterday's affection, yesterday's promises, but you wouldn't feel it anymore. You'd remember it intellectually. You'd know it happened. But emotionally, it would feel like reading about someone else's life. And how do you explain that to someone you love? How do you say, I know I told you I loved you yesterday, but the person who said that doesn't exist anymore? Maybe you'd try to honor yesterday's commitments. Maybe you'd stay. Maybe you'd act as if the feelings were still there. But would that be love? Or would it be performance? Would it be connection? Or would it be obligation? And how long before both people realize they're not really in a relationship with each other, but with a constantly changing stranger who happens to share the same body? Think about trust. Trust is built over time, through consistency, through proving day after day that you are who you say you are, that your words align with your actions, that the person someone knows today will be recognizable tomorrow. But if your personality shifts every 24 hours, trust becomes impossible. Not because you're dishonest, but because there is no stable you to be honest about. Your friends wouldn't know which version of you to expect. The confident one, the anxious one, the outgoing one, the withdrawn one. They wouldn't know if today's conversation would offend tomorrow's version of you. They wouldn't know if the support they offered yesterday would be welcomed today. Every interaction would become a gamble, and eventually people would stop investing. Not because they don't care, but because caring for someone who becomes a stranger every 24 hours is exhausting. And what about you? What about your sense of self? Your identity isn't just what you believe about yourself. It's the story you tell about who you've been and who you're becoming. It's the patterns you recognize, the growth you notice, the lessons you integrate. But if your personality shifts every day, where is the continuity? Where is the narrative thread that makes you you? You'd wake up with someone else's preferences, someone else's fears, someone else's values. You'd remember making certain choices, but you wouldn't understand why. You'd look at your life and see decisions that don't make sense to the person you are today. A career you don't care about, relationships you don't feel connected to, commitments you don't want to honor, goals that feel foreign, and every single day you'd have to decide, do I continue the path yesterday's version of me chose, or do I start over? Do I try to maintain consistency for the sake of the people around me? Or do I honor who I am right now, knowing that tomorrow I'll be someone else again? Maybe at first you'd try to adapt. Maybe you'd develop systems, rules, structures. You'd leave notes for yourself. Remember, you love your partner, even if you don't feel it today. Remember your work matters, even if it feels meaningless right now. You'd try to create artificial continuity where natural continuity no longer exists. But how long before those notes feel like instructions from a stranger? How long before you start resenting yesterday's version of yourself for making choices today's version has to live with? How long before you realize that you're not living your own life, but inheriting someone else's choices every single day? And here's where it becomes truly unsettling. Because maybe this thought experiment isn't as far from reality as it seems. Maybe we already change more than we admit. Maybe the person you are today isn't the same person you were 5 years ago. Maybe your values have shifted. Maybe your priorities have evolved. Maybe the things that once mattered deeply now feel distant. But the difference is time. The change happens slowly enough that you can integrate it. You can tell yourself a story about growth, about evolution, about becoming. But what if that process happened overnight? What if there was no time to adjust, no gradual transition, no story to make sense of the change? You'd be left with the uncomfortable truth that identity is more fragile than we want to believe. That the self we cling to is held together by nothing more than memory and continuity. That who we are today is only meaningful because we trust we'll still be roughly the same person tomorrow. Think about ambition, about long-term goals. Everything you're working toward is based on the assumption that future you will care about what present you cares about. You sacrifice now for a payoff later. You invest in relationships that will deepen over time. You build skills that will compound. You create a life that reflects your values. But if your personality shifts every 24 hours, delayed gratification becomes irrational. Why sacrifice today for a version of you tomorrow who might not care about what you sacrificed for? Why build something when the builder changes every day? Why plant seeds when you won't be the same person at harvest? You'd be forced to live entirely in the present, not by choice, not from wisdom, but from necessity, because the future would belong to someone else, someone who shares your body and your memories, but not your personality. not your drives, not your desires. And maybe that sounds freeing. Maybe part of you thinks, imagine not being bound by the past. Imagine starting fresh every day. But freedom without continuity isn't freedom. It's chaos. It's being unmoored from everything that gives life meaning. Because meaning isn't built in a day. Purpose isn't found in a moment. Growth doesn't happen overnight. Everything worth having requires time. And time requires a stable self to move through it. Without that, you're not free. You're fragmented. You're a series of disconnected moments pretending to be a life. So what would society look like? What would civilization look like if everyone's personality shifted every 24 hours? Contracts would be meaningless. Promises would be impossible. Justice would collapse. Because the person who committed a crime wouldn't be the same person standing trial. Marriage would be obsolete. Parenthood would be unstable. Friendship would be transactional. Everything built on trust, on commitment, on continuity would crumble. We'd have to rebuild everything around the assumption that people are temporary, that today's version of someone is completely unrelated to tomorrow's version. Maybe we'd develop new systems, new ways of connecting, new definitions of relationship, or maybe we'd simply drift apart, each person trapped in their own 24-hour cycle, unable to build anything lasting, unable to connect deeply, unable to become anyone beyond who they happen to be in this particular moment. But here's the part that should make you pause. The part that brings this thought experiment back to something real. Because while you don't literally change personality every 24 hours, you do change. Slowly, gradually, in ways you don't always notice until you look back and realize you're not the same person you used to be. And maybe that's the quiet lesson hidden in this impossible scenario. Maybe it's a reminder to honor the continuity you do have, to recognize that the stability of your identity is a gift, that the ability to commit, to build, to grow, to love the same person over time, to pursue the same dream across years, isn't a given. It's something fragile, something worth protecting. Maybe it's a reminder to forgive the versions of yourself you've outgrown, to understand that the person you were 5 years ago made choices with the personality they had at the time. And while you're different now, there's still a thread connecting you. Still a story that makes sense. Still a continuity that allows growth instead of just replacement. Maybe it's a reminder to be patient with the people around you, to recognize that they too are changing, slowly, in ways they might not even see, and that the person you fell in love with, or befriended, or committed to, is still there, even if they're evolving, even if they're becoming someone slightly different, because the difference between changing overnight and changing over time is everything. It's the difference between chaos and growth, between fragmentation and evolution, between losing yourself and finding yourself. So maybe the question isn't just, what if humans changed personality every 24 hours? Maybe the deeper question is, what are we doing with the continuity we have? Are we honoring it? Are we using it to build something meaningful? Are we recognizing how rare and precious it is to be the same person tomorrow that we are today? Because in a world where that's possible, in a world where you can make a promise today and still care about keeping it tomorrow, in a world where you can start building something and trust you'll still want to finish it, in a world where love can deepen over time instead of resetting every dawn, maybe that's not a limitation. Maybe that's the entire point. And maybe the greatest tragedy wouldn't be waking up as someone different every day. Maybe the greatest tragedy would be having the gift of continuity and never using it to become anyone at all.